There is the whole world which is allowing this to happen for more than 1.5 years. And we are talking after the very hard experience of the Second World War, where everybody said no more. But no more seems to be they meant only for white Europeans or for the Jews. It does not include Palestinians, this no more. It does not include Arabs. It does not include those who are not Europeans. There is something racist also in this, and it's unbelievable what's happening. It has been happening for 1.5 years. Bombing tents, babies. Nobody can call this a war. This is a genocide. And it must stop. It must stop.
Since October 7, Israel has presented three competing narratives about what it wants to achieve in Gaza, what the end goal is, what Israelis call the next day scenario. Is it to dismantle Hamas, a goal that its own generals have long maintained was impossible? Is it to rescue the hostages, an aim that despite 18 months of war has only been achieved through diplomacy? Or is it something else, what those on the far right have repeated over and over, to ethnically cleanse Gaza and bring it back under Israeli control? This week, we seem to have gotten an answer. All of the above. After breaking a ceasefire that in the first 2 months of this year led to the release of 30 Israeli hostages and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now says the real aim of the war is not the hostages, but a supreme victory over Hamas. After ducking rumors about what he may or may not have told his cabinet ministers over the weekend, Netanyahu announced it, that he's expanding the ground invasion in Gaza, calling up tens of thousands of reservists, and displacing the majority of Gaza's civilian population indefinitely. And this time, he says, there will be no withdrawal.
דבר אחד יהיה ברור, לא ייכנסו ויצאו. נגייס מילואים כדי שיבואו יתפסו שטח, אנחנו יוצאים מהשטח, אחר כך עושים פשיטות ממה שנשאר, אנחנו לא שם. זו לא הכוונה.
אוקיי.
הכוונה הפוכה.
This is precisely what Palestinians have accused Israel of since the very beginning, that its real aim was to occupy Gaza and prevent its people from ever returning to their homes. A year ago, the very same Netanyahu told the world this would never happen.
I want to make a few points absolutely clear. Israel has no intention of permanently occupying Gaza or displacing its civilian population. Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the Palestinian population. And we are doing so in full compliance with international law.
But this is not how others in his own government have described it. Over the weekend, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said Israel will not withdraw from Gaza even if there is another hostage deal, telling Israelis to, quote, stop being afraid of the word occupation. Meanwhile, Culture Minister Miki Zohar says Israel's real goal is, quote, the complete occupation of the Strip. And while this would inevitably endanger the lives of the hostages, he says, quote, there is no choice left. So what is the plan now? According to a former IDF strategist, the army is now pursuing what he calls the Little Gaza Plan. Amit Yagur, the former deputy head of the army's Palestinian arena, wrote in Maariv magazine this morning that Israel intends to push Gaza's people into small humanitarian encampments or little Gazas, clearing them from population centers. The army will then focus on destroying what remains of the infrastructure and take away Hamas's ability to manage services, security, and humanitarian aid. And once these towns and cities are cleared, they will remain in Israel's control. This is Netanyahu's alternative to what more than 70% of Israelis want from him, which is a new hostage deal and an end to the war. So why is he doing this now? To help us understand the situation, we're joined now by Palestinian-Israeli politician and former Knesset member Sammy Abu Shhadeh. Sammy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
Netanyahu has maintained that he has no intention of occupying Gaza, and yet, if you listen to those on the far right, they have been very clear about their intentions. In your opinion, who should we believe?
First of all, surely you can never believe Netanyahu. Also, before he was wanted for the ICC and ICJ as committing the worst crime any human being can do. He's wanted for committing a genocide. He was not any known as the biggest liar of all politicians ever. Also before being wanted for all this, for this crime, Netanyahu is not someone that you can believe. But we can believe the program that was published by this Israeli government few months at the beginning of the war, when the government asked one of its ministries to give different scenarios. What do they want to do with Gaza? And they proposed in one of their papers, it was published also on the 972 magazine, people can read it in English. What are the options? They had three scenarios, and they preferred the one that took about clearly ethnic cleansing all of Gaza. This is what Israel wants, this is what Netanyahu wants, this is what his extreme fascist government wants. And it's clear, they have been saying this, they wrote this, they have it as a plan. What prevented this was the Egyptian insistence not to allow this to happen. But Israel is still trying to do so, and their main target from this war is to do the ethnic cleansing in Gaza, the way they did it also in 1948.
And so when you hear the language that comes out of somebody like Bezalel Smotrich, you hear the language that comes from the cultural minister, is that representing a more honest face, in your opinion, of what the strategy is when it comes to Gaza?
First of all, let us remind everyone that when we are talking about Bezalel Smotrich, this is not like a neo-Nazi case in Germany, someone who is out of control, the whole state is against him, the constitution is against him. When we are talking about people like this extreme fascist Bezalel Smotrich or Itamar Ben-Gvir or all this extreme racists, they are Israeli elected ministers. They represent the majority in the Jewish Israeli population. The coalition was elected. And at the end of 2022, there were elections in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is not a dictator that came with the army to control. He is an elected figure. Same is Bezalel Smotrich. Same is Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir won on the last elections in Israel 500,000 votes. They represent a lot of people. Same all these extremists in the Israeli government. They are representing the majority within the Israelis. This is the problem. We are not talking about, there are extremists all over the world. You can find racists all over the world. But usually, in a normal societies, in democratic societies, these are totally marginalized communities. Nobody wants to bring them to rule. Nobody puts them as ministers. But this is not the case in Israel. Unfortunately, this is the real face of the society and state in Israel. But Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Benjamin Netanyahu, they are running the state.
We've been seeing protests in Israel over the last couple of weeks calling for a new deal in Gaza, calling for, there were some reservists that were saying that they wouldn't go back. Now that there has been an announcement very clearly, tens of thousands of reservists are going back for extended periods of time. There is this news that there's going to be permanent occupation of at least some parts of Gaza. How has the public reacted to this?
Unfortunately, from the beginning of this war, there was a very fast deterioration within the Israeli general public, those who supported the coalition and those who supported the opposition. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the Israelis supports the war. They have a problem with the Israeli hostages in Gaza. We, of course, totally think differently about this thing. We want to see peace. We want to end not just this war, we want to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on a solution based on the values of justice and equality for all, Israelis and Palestinians. Unfortunately, Muhammad, we don't have Israeli partners for this basic, normal human rights agenda. In the coalition and in the opposition, they supported the war. They supported the war crimes. There wasn't one statement of an Israeli politician from the Israeli coalition or opposition that came from human values against the war to say basic things that they are against killing innocent people. They are against starving babies to death. There is something really dangerous, not just for the Palestinians, for the whole area. This way of thinking about all the non-Jews as inferiors and non-human in order to allow Israel to do all these crimes. This is something really dangerous, and I think it is going also to be dangerous for the Israeli society itself. These people committing all these war crimes, they are not going to be healthy psychologically later on. They will come back to this society with all this thick way of thinking. It's very dangerous for everyone, including the Israelis. But their insistence on revenge and violence is preventing them from seeing the truth.
And we keep seeing polls coming out of Israel measuring public opinion about the war, and there increasingly has been shifting towards wanting the government to make another deal with Hamas, one that brings the rest of the hostages home. There are these polls that suggest that the majority of Israeli public now don't believe that the war is going to lead to that hostage return. How do we feel about these polls? Do you think that they're not representative of what the public actually wants?
I think, of course, and I think that the majority wants to have the hostages. This is basic human thing. We also don't want to see hostages. We don't also want to see political prisoners. We want all the people to be free, Israelis and Palestinians. Any human being who has some human standards don't want to see all these people suffering. Not the Israelis and not the Palestinians. But the problem that we see within the Israeli public opinion is that they care only about the Israeli hostages. They talk about the 59 people who we want them also released, but they are forgetting 2,300,000 Palestinians. They are seeing that Israel is bombing the hospitals and the churches and the mosques and the infrastructure and not allowing people to eat. They are starving people to death. And you don't see any signs in their demonstrations asking to stop the starvation of all their hostages and the Palestinians. This is why there is something wrong within this understanding of what's happening within the Israeli society. Part of the people who see the demonstration thinks that there are those who are against the war. No, they are not against the war. They just want to save their hostages. They care only about their hostages, which is something totally human and understandable if you would see them also talking a little bit about the other side suffering. There's a genocide going on. Israel is a very small state, Hamad. Most of the people have family members involved in this genocide. They know what's going on. It's geographically very small. The community is very small. Everybody knows that there is something wrong, but nobody cares. And this is something dangerous, not just for us. This is dangerous because sometimes it brings you to lose hope in humanity, Muhammad. A society like the Jewish society that suffered a genocide and now is, after a few decades, committing a genocide for another people. It is something really dangerous for all humanity, not just for us. And you wouldn't imagine that the victims of such a cruel crime would be victimizers a few decades after that. You would expect them to be more human, more open-minded, would go against such a crime, not to allow it.
And there's always this question about just how aware the Israeli public is to what is happening on the ground in Gaza, how aware they are of what the statements that come out of Hamas, for example. And there was a real moment where that barrier felt like it was crossed earlier this year during those hostage negotiation ceremonies that Hamas organized. And they were broadcast basically into the home living room of every single Israeli. And that was viewed by many as a clear victory for Hamas and a clear sign of failure for Israel's government and Israel's war. Do you think that moment really incentivized the government in Israel to scrap that ceasefire, stop these kind of displays and into people's homes and return to the war arena?
First of all, I think that the Israeli public don't want to see the truth. They are choosing only to see their media, which is lying to them from the beginning of the war. They have options. Everybody can watch, and a lot of them knows English, a lot of them knows other languages. They, if they want to, they can see the truth. They are choosing to continue being blind in order to continue the crimes. And they are choosing so. Now, there is no serious discussion within the Israeli society regarding all these crimes. All and anyone who brings his voice against the war crimes is being silenced. We are not allowed to do demonstrations against the war. Imagine a society that have a consensus on war crimes. Everybody is allowed to ask for a genocide or destruction or starving people to death. All this is allowed and legitimate. The only voice which says that wars is bad, wars are unhuman, stop wars, there is no military solution for the Palestinian question, we are considered extreme and our voices are silenced. Imagine what kind of a society they are developing here. All of those who are supporting a genocide are considered legitimate. Those who are supporting peace are considered extreme. There is something sick.
I want to ask you, Sammy, to round off our conversation, what it's like for you as a citizen of Israel, as somebody who used to spend your entire career working within the machinations of the Israeli government and the Israeli Knesset, and now as a citizen that sees all of this climate that you described around you of denial, of refusing to acknowledge what is happening. As a Palestinian, how does that feel, watching all of this unfold, knowing that there are limits to what you yourself can and can't say in public?
First of all, as a human being, before of being a Palestinian, this is, and we are living in an unbearable situation. You are seeing a genocide, but you are not allowed to raise your voice against the genocide. You are not allowed to demonstrate against the genocide. You are not allowed to say anything based on the values of justice and equality for all. And as a Palestinian, these people who are being killed daily are my people. They are our families. And I am talking to you now from Yafa. In 1948, our families passed the ethnic cleansing of the Nakba of 1948. Big part of them have been expelled to Gaza. These are our direct families, Muhammad, and they are killing our cousins and every family in Yafa. We have relatives in Gaza, and we are seeing them passing all this unhuman suffering that nobody can really suffer in the world, happening for 1.5 years, and the world is watching. Not just the Israelis are committing the crimes. There is the whole world which is allowing this to happen for more than 1.5 years. And we are talking after the very hard experience of the Second World War, where everybody said no more. But no more seems to be, they meant only for white Europeans or for the Jews. It does not include Palestinians, this no more. It does not include Arabs. It does not include those who are not Europeans. There is something racist also in this, and it's unbelievable what's happening. It has been happening for 1.5 years. Bombing tents, babies. Nobody can call this a war. This is a genocide. And it must stop. It must stop.